Okay, here I am inside Navigraph, and today I'm going to do an IFR flight from FAPG, which is Plettenberg Bay, to FAGG, which is George, along the South African southeastern coast. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need is, let's have a look at the airport, and all we really need from here is the length of our runway and the direction, and we're going to take off from runway 30. For demonstration purposes, I want to tune in the NDB, so let's have a look. All I want from here is, this is an NDB approach to Plettenberg Bay. All I want from here is this frequency for the PY NDB. Okay, then the other charts I'm going to need are from George, and let's first have a look at the approach, and we're going to do an ILS arrival on runway 29. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I am going to need this ILS map, and the information I'm going to need from this is I'm going to need the frequency for the GRV VOR, and I'm going to need the frequency for the GGI ILS. I'm also going to need this whole ILS map to look at my altitude of approach, how far away I need to be. I need it for my minimums, which you can see is Barrow 848 or 200 above ground, and also for my missed approach. Here's the ILS. We're going to come in at 2,005, descending to 2,500 feet, and we're going to get onto a track of 294 and come in and do the ILS landing. So I've made a note of that frequency, I've made a note of the ILS frequency, and I'll have this map open for reference. So just to recap, we're going to take off from Plettenberg Bay. I'm going to demonstrate how to put an ADF frequency into the G1000. Then we're going to follow the GPS, and when we get round about here, we don't want to hit the airport at an angle. We want to move over in this direction and come in on the airport, and more or less a 294 bearing, so that we can land on runway 29, which the course for runway 29 is 294. There are some pretty high mountains just north of this route, 8 to 10,000 feet. So I want to stay below that escarpment, and the VOR will keep me going in the correct direction. So let's jump in the plane, and the first thing I'm going to do is put the GRV VOR into nav1. The frequency is 116.6, and I use the large knob to move the numbers left of the decimal, and the small knob to move numbers right of the decimal. Once that's in position, I'll transfer it into the active place, and I'll set the GGI ILS frequency, which is 110.1. Okay, let's tune the ADF radio. Push the ADF button once, and then push the FMS button. It will flash. Use the small button to change the numbers, and the large button to move from one place to another. This is very unintuitive and cumbersome, and I'm sure Steve Jobs would not be happy with this. When you have the correct frequency, push the enter button, it gets it flashing, and push enter again, which activates the frequency. In the same manner, you can also set which nav 1 or 2, you want to get the DME from. When you've done that, push the ADF DME button again and the screen will go. Let's get the NDB info. We do that by pressing PFD, then bearing 1. It'll show nav 1 first. Press it again, and it will show nav 2. Press it again, and it will show GPS. And the 4th time, it will show us the NDB. And you will see the compass rose has a blue arrow on it now, which is pointing to that NDB. Let's look at all the options we have under the PFD button. We can manipulate the map. We can switch it off or switch it on. And when it's on, we can go across to the range button. And we can zoom in and zoom out. Push the range button and you get a little arrow, and you can move the arrow off screen entirely. Your plane will disappear, but no worries. All you have to do to get it back is push the range button again. Okay, push the back button and go to the PFD sub menu, and let's see how we can set the transponder. Push the transponder button. You can be in standby, on, or altitude. When you're in the air, you must always be on altitude, so let's leave it on altitude. If we push VFR, we'll automatically get a 1200, but we can actually set the code we've been giving. So let's just set it as 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's look at a new thing where we can switch off the synthetic visibility. So that's off, no synthetic visibility, and that's on. The next thing we can put on our PFD is the wind. So push the wind button. There are 3 options. The first one's quite useful. It shows you the component in front and behind and from the side, but option 3 shows you where the wind's coming from and is probably the best one, and its speed. We can switch on the DME by pushing the DME button. Remember, we set our DME to be nav 1, so when we're in the air it'll pick up the GRV VOR and give us a DME to that. Push the back button and the CDI button, and that will toggle us between GPS VOR1 and VOR2, and the autopilot will follow whatever is showing here. The timer reference button has a pretty unintuitive timer. I'm not going to bother with that. Move again with the large button, and let's set our glide speed. Let's set it to on, and then later you'll see it'll appear on the speed tape. I'm going to do the same with the VR number. I'm going to leave VX, which is steepest climb. We don't need it today. And I'm going to put the VY speed in, because that's our most efficient climb speed. While we're down here, I may as well set our minimums so that the minimums will also appear on the PFD. Use the large button to go down to minimums, and our minimums are 848 baro today, so let's set that. I think the direct to button and the flight plan button, setting flight plans, activating ILSs, deserves a tutorial on its own, and I'm not going to go into that too deeply today. Safe to say, you can just go to the nearest and find an airport and push direct to, and you can go straight there. It'll be on your flight plan. The menu button in the real aircraft has lots of options, but in our flight sim all we can do is manually brighten or dim the screens. Let's move across to the MFD, and on the left we can see engine RPM, gallons per hour, oil pressure, oil temperature, EGT, exhaust gas temperature, fuel quantity, hours on the engine, and the electrical box information. Let's move across to the map button, press GPS. You can set topography or NextRad, which is satellite weather. Doesn't work too well at the moment. There's also a declutter button. So let's go back, and there are a few more options under the menu button. So press the menu button, press enter twice, and you will get to the options. You can set the map north up, or heading up, track up, or desired track up. Heading up is probably the most common one to set it at. Here we are set up on runway 30 at Plettenberg Bay. Brakes are released, throttle to full, and I am going to accelerate up to VOR speed, which is 55 knots, and then pull back about 7.5 degrees and try and keep my aircraft at VY speed, which is about 74 knots. I will not touch the throttle, but will do this by nose up or nose down. I'm heading in a westerly direction, so the altitude will be 4,000 feet, which is an even number when you are going west. On the speed tape you can see the little Y that indicates the VY speed that I set. Below it is the G, which is my glide scope speed, and below that is the R, which was my V rotate speed. Over here is the baro setting for my ILS minimums, which I set while I've been talking, autopilot on, and I've set 74 knots in the flight level change box by pushing the up and down buttons. The next thing I'm going to do is push the nav button so that the autopilot can follow the flight plan in the GPS. Just for fun, let's change the MFD to north up again by pressing the menu button, then the enter button, and then using the large FMS button to scroll down. You can see that I'm getting my DME from the GRV VOR, and my blue button is still pointing back to the NDB. Here we are flying over the famous little town of Knysna with Feason Island visible on our right and the famous heads on the left. Let's skip forward a little, and we're now in IFR conditions, and I want to get my VOR course set to 294 because that's the direction we need to approach the airport on a 294 bearing. So the first thing to do is to put it into heading mode. Then using the course button I'm going to set 294 in the course. So let's tell the autopilot to follow the VOR now and get us onto a 294 course by pushing the CDI button. If the course is too far to your right, you may have to use the heading button to help the autopilot get onto course. So that's what I've done here, and you can see I'm about 40 degrees to the right, and I'm waiting for this little green line to straighten, and then I'll know I'm in the correct position, and then I will hit the nav button again. So the line is nearly straight, and I'm going to hit nav, and then you'll see that the aircraft will turn towards the left to get onto a 294 course to approach the airport. Now you can see I'm following the VOR towards the airport. The 294 to the VOR will not be exactly the same as the course to the ILS, but it'll be close. I've still got 21 DME to slow my aircraft down, get down to the ILS altitude, so we've got plenty of time to get stabilized. You can see on the MFD that I'm no longer following my GPS course, but I'm more inland following the VOR course. Here is the ILS map. I want to intercept the glide scope at just under 9 DME. It's a 3-degree slope, and at 70 knots we'll be doing about 372 foot per minute. My missed approach is along the 294 radial for 8 DME. My decision altitude is 848 feet barrow. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the ILS frequency active, which is 110.1. And you immediately see that I get a white GS in the FMA, and a little G appears on the altitude tape with a diamond just below it. The diamond is up there, so I am below the glide scope at the moment. So here I am at about 7 DME, and I'm waiting for the glide scope to be captured. I will know it's captured when the white GS turns green, and when the little diamond below the G on the altitude tape starts descending towards the yellow indicator. So as that diamond begins to descend, I need to watch my speed. My glide speed is about 68 knots, and I need to use the throttle to keep it at that point. You can see the little green diamond is slowly coming down, and once we hit the glide, I'm fully configured as far as flaps go, and I can start seeing the lights of the airport. As we capture the glide scope and we see that the little white GS turns green, I need to watch my speed and also remind myself that my minimums are 848 barrow, and before we reach there I need to see the runway properly. My speed is stabilized. I'm at 1650 feet, and let's look outside the window, and there's the runway, so we don't have to fly a missed approach. I'm descending at 300 feet per minute. My speed is stabilized. My green arrow showing my lateral deviation is good, and my little green diamond is also good. So I have a stabilized approach as I'm flying down towards the runway. So that's the end of this tutorial. As we come down to the runway, I'm going to switch off the autopilot and make a manual landing, and then taxi to the terminal. I'm going to speed this up so that this video doesn't get too long. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.